Welcome to the Compost Pile, a podcast where we break down gardening, homesteading, and more. Join your hosts, David Poole and Aaron Barnhill, as they pile up information and break it down so that you can be more successful in the garden.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Compost Pile, your podcast for all things gardening and homesteading. And I'll tell you what, it's been a while. It feels really good to be back. It's good to see you. It's good to be in the room.
Good to see you too, man.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can knock a couple of episodes out. That way you won't have to miss me as much. Yeah. But driving over here, I had a thought. I thought, you know what? It's a summertime right now. I'm struggling with a lot of things in my garden, in my yard. All of my spring veggies are kind of dying. My cucumbers, tomatoes, everything is just struggling really hard, except for my trees. My trees are all doing really well. So I thought, hey, why don't I ask you a bunch of questions about fruit trees, aka a backyard orchard?
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I just kind of want to know, like, maybe what I could put in my yard to really get me through these stagnant points. The peak of the summer, where all of those other veggies and stuff are dying back in the fruit, I'm getting citrus still.
Yeah.
So what else? What else is there?
Well, I mean, you can grow most of your common fruits, but I think before we really dive into what you can grow, you might want to think about what kind of space do you have?
Okay, cool. Let's start off that way. Yeah.
Because, I don't want somebody to get too excited about, realizing they could plant all kinds of fruits, but you got to think about space. If you don't have a whole lot of space, berries are easy. You can keep them more compact. There's dwarf varieties. We can talk about that as we go. Yeah. There are some things that you can keep smaller.
So let's think about it in this terms. Let's think about what a backyard orchard can be based on a townhouse, a suburb, or a country house, right? I think that'd make it a little bit easier. You know what I mean? Renters, sorry, if you're renting an apartment, there's not a lot for you here.
And you can, even in a townhouse, like, if you not all of those have backyards.
No, but a lot of them have like a little courtyard.
Yeah, but you can still container grow.
Yeah,
berries very easily.
Especially, blackberries are easy.
Yeah, I mean, blueberries are simple. And specifically dwarf varieties that are compact, because some berry plants can get pretty large. Blueberry get pretty sizable.
Blueberries get 12 feet.
Yeah, and if you have the wrong variety for your space, you might need two varieties for pollination.
Okay, that makes sense.
You've eaten up all your space. So that's strawberries obviously are great for compact space because they're such a small, tiny plant.
Yeah.
Most people grow those almost as an annual more than perennial, even though they can be a perennial and they can overwinter very easily. But, outside of that, you're kind of limited. I mean, there are some dwarf patio varieties of citrus and such out there.
Yeah. I find that like citrus kind of really, it's almost like when a goldfish in the bowl, right? It only grows as big as its container allows it.
And you can limit that size, but realistically, limiting that size does limit the production.
Sure.
So,
and if you're in a smaller space, pruning is really important when it comes to citrus. I know a lot more about citrus than I do other trees, and that's kind of what I want to explore with you.
If you're like,
what else can I get?
If you're in a townhome, you can grow some potted container grown fruits, but it's mostly going to lean more likely towards that citrus and berries probably over anything, just because you can maintain the size a little bit better.
Right. If we're in a townhouse, kind of, we have a courtyard, we have limited space.
Yep. Yeah. But if we're in a standard like residential home, then we can grow a little bit bigger array. So we could grow, we could try peaches. We could do apples. Plums, pears. You could grow. What else am I thinking?
That's kind of news to me. You said a lot of things that I feel like don't really do very well here. I've always been kind of steered away from
like your stone fruits.
Yeah, specifically from stone fruits like peaches. I feel like peaches are really susceptible to humidity and powdery mildew and all that stuff. And
they can be.
I think it affects their flowers, so they don't even produce fruit. It's just what I've been told.
It all comes down to variety selection, but there are varieties that will produce viable crop here in Southeast Texas or the southern, part of Texas, to an extent.
Yeah.
But they might not be those varieties that, you go to the store and you can readily find and that you have grown to love.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is, I'd like to tell our listeners a little bit about some of those pitfalls and stuff when you go to a big box store, because when it comes to these trees, these fruiting trees, names can be kind of confusing too, because most of the pear trees that are at these stores are decorative. They're not going to bear any fruit.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of that, but it'd be a really easy mistake to make, to go and get this and plant it and expect fruit.
There's a lot of information, when you go, you obviously you can look at a tag for most plants and get, key information, sun requirements, like water requirements, if it needs like special type of soil.
Yeah.
But the one thing with fruits that it's not going to tell you is chill hours.
Okay.
And that's where most mistakes get made from purchasing trees at big box stores. You have all the variety name and the information, and you assume because it's at your store in your hometown that it will grow here.
I assume that when I go to Lowe's and they have an inventory of trees, that they have made that inventory for the surrounding area. That's my assumption.
And they probably have made it for the relative area, maybe a larger area, but at the same time, knowing that we have such a warm climate, not all those trees are going to do well here. And so you've kind of got to get really, really niche with some of these varieties. Mm-hmm. And the names can be deceiving too, even for the varieties. There's I'm going to draw a blank here. There's Tropic King and Tropic Queen, peaches.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, well, tropic,
right. That means hot.
It means hot.
It means close to the equator.
But that doesn't mean we're not a tropical zone.
No, we're subtropical.
But you think, oh, will that grow here? It actually will, because we've got to look at those chill hours, and that's what you're not going to find on that tag. You're not going to find whether you need 500 chill hours, 200. And what I mean by chill hours, for anybody listening, if you're not familiar with
I've only ever paid attention to chill hours specifically with apples. And I did not know that really is across all fruit trees.
Yep, pretty much all your fruit trees except citrus, because citrus is an evergreen, doesn't require it. But your chill hours are essentially how many cumulative hours in a season that the temperature is 45 degrees and under.
Okay.
So, and that's kind of most of that happens during the dormancy stage of a lot of these plants. So they look like sticks.
So, they're all deciduous is what you're saying. So deciduous fruit trees have a chill hour requirement for a season. Okay, cool.
So,
got it.
Now, if we don't get enough chill hours for a specific variety, does that mean the tree won't grow here? No, that's not it. The tree could grow here just fine, but it's going to grow here strictly almost as an ornamental specimen. Okay. It's not going to produce fruit. So we have to pick species that'll grow within our chill hours. And because we know we live in a subtropical climate, it's humid, it's hot.
Yeah.
In your mind, how many hours do you think we get below 45 degrees in a given year?
Man, that's below 45. How many hours? Let's say for a month and a half, maybe a month and a half, 12 hours. I don't even know.
The average,
have to get a pen and paper. And write it down.
It's hard to say because it varies so drastically. Yeah. But I would say in most plant species, anything over 400 hours is way too much.
Okay.
Anything even between that 300 and 400 mark could be iffy. So you find a lot of the varieties that people will plant here for peaches and apples are going to be real low chill varieties that can shoot for 150 to 250 hours.
Okay, yeah.
So those are realistic amounts that we can consistently get over and over again. Does that mean that these varieties are the best tasting peaches that money can buy, or apples, or whatever you're targeting? Maybe not. There probably are potentially some better varieties, but we can only grow what the climate allows us to grow. And that's a really important thing. And the second thing, when you go to a box store, you're not going to find information on is whether it needs a pollinator or not.
Right.
So
I struggle with that right now because I have an avocado tree. It's never produced a single avocado. I don't think it needs a companion tree. It needs another pollinator.
They have what they call A and B varieties, like that act as the male and female for cross pollination. And the same is true for most of your chill hour requiring fruits. Citrus being an evergreen, it does not need a pollinator. They're all self-fertile. Right. Now, there are a bunch of varieties out there that are self-fertile when it comes to stone fruits, when it comes to berries. So you want to know that information because that plays into the space requirement factor. Right. If we're going to plant an apple and a peach tree or any combination of things, and we look at that tag and it tells me this tree is going to grow 15 to 25 foot tall and 20 foot in diameter, and I live in a residential backyard, that might be my whole backyard for most people. Right. Some people you might be able to fit one or two more depending on where you spaced them and how you laid it out. So that's really important information because in most instances we want to have a self-fertile variety. At least that's my choice because I'm mostly dealing in the retail space with people with small confined spaces.
Yeah, at least suburban sort of a style lot, like a quarter acre.
And that's totally different. Now, varieties that need pollinators, those are going to be suited for those people that live maybe on the outskirts of Southeast Texas that have larger pieces of property, that have pasture land, that can space things out and they have more room.
Right.
And those are often the better choice because they're going to be more fruitful. If you take a self-fertile Israeli apple like the Einsheimer and you plant it out, it grows, it will produce apples. They're pretty tasty. It's a great producing plant. It handles the climate here really well.
Which is also confusing too, because when I think of Israel or the Middle East, I think of a very arid climate.
Yep.
And it makes me think that those wouldn't do very well here. Just the same as, Fredericksburg peaches don't do very well here at all.
The Einsheimer does incredibly well. We sold one to a customer many years ago, and she comes back every year.
Really,
just like in love with it. Like she's like, I bought this tree here. It's beautiful. It produces, and she brought us some of them this year. They were a little.
Apples,
they weren't quite ripened fully yet, but they still had a pretty good flavor. They don't taste as good if they're not fully ripened.
I see. Yeah.
But you're not going to grow a red apple here, or
no, you're not going to have like a Washington apple.
It's mostly golden apples are what typically fits the chill hour profile. But if you had that Einsheimer and you paired it up with a secondary species as a cross-pollinator that flowers at the same time, then that Einsheimer would actually produce more than it would as a self-fertile.
So let me ask you this. So if you had an Einsheimer apple, and then you had a native like crab apple, right? Both apples, one's just a really edible and one's an inedible. Can that cross-pollinate? Can that give it the pollen it needs?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Because that's kind of the way, like I said, really the experience I have is with citrus. And citrus doesn't really matter. If you have a lemon tree and a lime tree, they're just swapping pollen all day long. Even an orange tree, they're just always swapping. And it doesn't really matter very much.
I don't know if that plays into it or not. I've never been asked that. So
all right, you have to figure that one out.
Research time.
Get back to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So most of the time, the average people are going to be selecting self-fertile varieties for space.
Yeah.
And also, if we jump back to one of the last times me and you sat here and we talked about sustainability.
Right. Yeah, that was the last time.
So self-fertile varieties also play into sustainability because if I plant 2 apples or 2 pears or whatever it is and they cross-pollinate and then I'm loaded down with 100 or a mass amount of them am I actually physically prepared to handle preserving, putting
Sure.
it away, distributing them amongst family and friends? So it does create.
If you have a very heavy fruit bearing tree and you're not prepared to get it, it will rot on the ground.
Yeah.
The fruit will drop. And it's not like we live in the middle of the woods, we just have kind of squirrels to take care of it and stuff like that. It will also attract other critters you might not want, you might
varmints.
want, but you're going to have lots of possums coming in and you're going to have all kinds of, it's just, you're right. It can be daunting if you're not ready for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
Pears are the one that I always think of the most when I think of people not prepared to harvest. Cutting grass. If you ever had to cut grass around a pear tree and you run over one that you didn't see, it's like hitting a baseball.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
So, because it's such a hard fruit. So
tangent time. This is what I've come back here for the tangents, right? People tend to like attribute malice where there's no malice all the time when it comes to government and stuff like that. So I know that there's a lot of people who are always confused why municipalities use ornamental trees instead of fruit bearing trees, right? We have a homeless population. We have all of this. So people will ask that, like, why would Houston plant ornamental pear trees all throughout the city and not plant real pear trees? And that's why, like, they're not going to go around rounding up all the pears when they fall on the ground and start rotting, because back in the day, let's say in New York did have all real trees. They didn't have, fruiting or ornamental trees. All of their trees fruited. And it was described in newspapers as like a wave of stench, unlike anything else, like just ferment and rot when one particular tree would all just drop their fruit at one time because they work on a season. So it's not always malice that, municipalities use like Bartlett pears and stuff like that. I know it sounds like a good idea to plant fruit trees for people that don't go, but logistically, it would take a lot more. So the tangent over. So you can take it back over now.
So a lot of these plants could be theoretically also grown on a smaller scale. Like you can do. Are you familiar with like I probably don't pronounce this right, but that's because I'm from the South and I'm just a espalier. So they train. You can train fruit trees like apples and such to grow like a main trunk, and then you prune it as such so that you grow laterals.
So it's like you're bonsaiing the trees?
But you can grow them up against a wall or a fence.
No, I don't know anything about this.
For people who don't have a lot of space, it's a technique that is very old. But it's kind of like bonsaiing. It requires work. You can't just let it go all crazy. But I bring that up because it fortifies that like you ideally can grow some type of fruit
in your space. Yeah.
Any space. And the spalier may not be the best thing for you, but just it's there to say, hey, like I could grow. Maybe I have a small backyard and I want some citrus, but I don't have room for,
a giant orange tree.
They can
get really big. Yeah.
Maybe I could grow them as a hedgerow along my fence in lieu of ornamental landscaping.
And citrus is really good at that too. It's very prunable, very beginner friendly, and shrubbery.
I might get a very sustainable amount of citrus from it as well because I have a smaller plant.
Right.
So it's going to support less fruit. So there's ways around, thinking like, hey, it's a tree.
Sure. Yeah.
And to like going back, like even berries, like blueberries are a pretty sizable plant.
Yes, they get that way.
Like, that's one of my child's favorite fruits. And when we went to plant blueberries, it's like, I don't have room right now in the setting that I'm working in to be able to plant, this giant shrub-like berry plant. So I was able to find a self-fertile dwarf species, and at probably year 2 to 3, more along 3, it'll typically produce about 3 pints per bush, which is not a massive amount.
It's not as big as some of the like giant Christmas tree size blueberries, but
again, like if I have 5 or 6 plants at 3 pints a piece relatively, like now I have a couple gallons,
right.
and that even while that seems like not a lot,
It's enough for your household.
It's a lot of berries to figure out what I'm going to do with in a timely fashion.
That's a lot of pies. Yeah.
So whether I'm freezing them or turning them into something else, being able to use them and reap that harvest without wasting, I think is really important.
Yeah.
So what other questions you got about fruit trees?
So and I know not every tree is the same too. I would like your input on this so I can better communicate it to other people. So just the other week, a coworker of mine who's gotten bitten by the gardening bug, right? She has really big, nice backyard garden now, has raised beds and all that. She has an improved Meyer lemon and it's bearing fruit now. And she told me that she was trying to germinate and plant some of the seeds from that. And I had to explain to her that I don't know that that's exactly going to work. It will produce a lemon. If you can germinate it and get it up, it will make a lemon tree. But the lemons from that tree probably won't taste like this, improved Meyer lemon because because the genetics of every seeds are different. That's why most fruit trees are grafted.
Yep.
And then I had to go into the story about Washington apple. If you had a Washington apple, well, they're all the same exact thing. Every Washington apple that you've ever had is a clone, right? It's all from one apple tree that produced a particularly delicious apple on Old Man Washington's farm a long time ago, and that's why it's named that. But I don't know. Is that every tree?
I don't think necessarily,
because I know it is for sure in apples.
Now, like that citrus or that lemon, yeah, it probably grow a lemon, and it might be a Meyer lemon, but it's still that tree in itself is going to be void of some of the qualities
because the grafted trees.
Mm-hmm. So you while you are reproducing this tree, without regrafting it, you're losing some of that cold hardiness. Now, there are people out there that are against like grafting, and they think that you should plant things in the ground and you should get them to weather and become acclimated. And that is totally possible. But that's not viable for every single person.
It also takes a long time.
Yeah,
that takes a long time.
So
if you're in your forever home, I could see that, but if say you are in a townhouse or something, and that takes a long time.
Yeah, it's so I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm sure it will produce a lemon.
Yeah, it will,
but it's not. But there's no way to know for sure if it's going to be a.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know and I could have been wrong with that on citrus, but for sure and maybe it's that way with stone fruit or not, but with apples particularly, you can take, if you have a Cosmic Crisp apple tree that you got and you take some of those seeds and germinate those, they might not be that apple at all.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm not sure which other ones that would be with, but I know for sure apples. It's like the whole Johnny Appleseed thing, right? People think another tangent, but people think Johnny Appleseed went around and planted apples for everybody to have good apples to eat. But, they were all just random seeds, all just random apple seeds. And the apples that came up were all very random. And most of them were inedible. They were grown to, produce cider, right? To continue the cider industry, not really the eating apple industry.
And you think about on that point, pears are a great option to think about. Not every pear is like a fresh eating pear.
Yeah, no.
Some of them are only good for canning. So true. Some fruits have like certain things that they're very good and use for and not so good in others. So you have to think about like, what am I going to do with this? And like, is this variety going to be well suited? And I really, what I mean by that, I guess, is that when you get ready to get out there and put any form of fruit, no matter where you are and what size, like you need to do some homework.
Yeah.
And when you go to buy them, go someplace that has a knowledgeable staff that can answer how many chill hours there are.
Like mid-county farming fee.
Like, this is not a promotional, but at the same time, like, do you have a variety that will work for what I'm doing? Can they tell me, do I need a pollinator?
Yeah.
How many chill hours? Because if you can't get that information, you should stop.
And there's a lot to what you're saying. There's a lot more information with fruit trees and even to extent bushes like blueberries, but there's a lot more information of them than houseplants and with yard crops, right? You don't need to know a lot to grow a cucumber.
No.
But we have these trees that are supposed to last year over year over year. You put more money into them than perennials. So yeah, you should do your homework.
It's also good to know. I mean, like, some of your stone fruits don't have a massive lifespan. They're not trees that are going to be there for 100 years. They just don't last.
That's just not their genetics.
It's like, like you mentioned, like the Bradford pear. It's a flowering pear, but even as a pear, it only has a 15 to 20 year lifespan.
Really? Yeah.
And then it begins to die out and becomes very diseased.
Also, if you live here, do not get a Bradford pear. Don't get one. They're really weak in the wind. And what do we have? Tropical storms and hurricanes. Don't get a Bradford pear.
They're not disease resistant at all.
They're terrible.
Yep.
And that's part of why I like to ask you some of these questions, because some of the big box stores, I feel like they are always stocked with a Bradford pear. You know what I mean? And you go there and you buy it and you put it in your yard. And the second that you have maybe a harsh season or wind come through, it's just tore up and you just want to take it out. But now you have a stump.
And they're not even good as an ornament.
I have one in my backyard that needs to come down. It's a terrible tree. It needs to come down. But it's grown around the power line in and I can't do it. So
nothing you can do.
Yeah. Nothing I can do. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, let's end it with this. Just with an average situation. So let's say a suburban home with a nice backyard in this area. What would your top 3 fruit trees be?
Blueberries.
Okay.
Because for me personally, I find that they're incredibly easy.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Number 2, blackberries. I couldn't tell you the last time that I've watered my blackberries. If you think about,
sounds like a weed almost. Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about like how many times you see a blackberry bramble growing up in random places
in the ditch,
they're native species, but even the varieties that we utilize to grow for food harvest, like, they're very resilient. And oftentimes I think I probably should water those. And then I'm like, maybe tomorrow. And then they still just look perfectly fine all the time. And they still produce like crazy. And then number 3, just for ease of use, would be citrus.
Okay.
Some form of citrus, because those 3 are going to yield somebody a pretty good success rate right out of the gate. Citrus being the hardest, because citrus, unlike all the others, can't handle the cold.
Right.
They don't go dormant, so they have to be protected. So you got to be mindful of placement.
That's why most of my citrus are in pots.
Yeah.
And if I were to put a citrus in the ground, I would go with cold tolerant grapefruit.
Satsumas are super cold tolerant. The right varieties. But
a lot of oranges are also quite cold tolerant too.
But I would say those are where we find most people. That fills most people's actual like wants as a home grower.
Okay. Yeah.
Because if you think about like the average person going to the store, those are probably some of the top 3 things that are going to be purchased.
And those berries are expensive
too.
They're expensive.
They are.
Yeah.
So they're a great starting choice, and after that, the rest of them, I kind of toss them up all into, success about the same,
Sure.
But, and the requirements, do you have the space? Do you have what it takes to be able to get it going, protect it, prune it? And it's a conversation for a whole nother day.
Well, we'll save that conversation for another day. This has been a really good one. I feel like I've learned a lot. Thanks for having me back. It's been good coming back after a long time. And we'll see you guys on the next one.